Hello, everybody, and welcome again to our conversation on religion and American life. This is the Meeting House, and I'm your host, Dr. Dwight A. Moody. Glad you joined us today for our conversation. Coming to you from our studios just outside of Greenville, South Carolina. My guest today, somebody I've wanted to meet for a long time, Dr. Karen Swallow Prior, author, columnist, commentator on religion and American life, professor. Welcome to the Meeting House, Karen.
It's a pleasure to be with you today, Dwight.
I'm so thrilled to talk with you. I've read a bunch of your stuff, and I know that you intentionally and by conviction and by calling are a voice for conservative Christian perspectives on things, but I want to say your tribe is in a mess. Am I right about this?
I'm not going to argue with you. I can't disagree.
In its political version, in its theological version, and its religious version, we're all trying to figure out what indeed is an evangelical. It's gotten so much press over the last few years, and you're writing a book about it. Are you going to clear it all up for us?
Well, I would not say I'm going to clear it all up, but I am trying to give a little perspective and history in the book. I mean, I actually did my dissertation a number of years ago in the area of evangelicalism in 18th century England because I was studying an evangelical novelist at the time. My area of expertise is English literature. And so that's I came at it sideways. I was studying literature. I wasn't evangelical. I am an evangelical, but I discovered sort of one of my own who is buried beneath the annals of history. And so I began to examine all those years ago what evangelicalism is, how it's defined, how long its history is. And here we are, in a few centuries later in 2016, and all of a sudden the word evangelical is making headlines, and it's a category for pollsters, and no one seems to know what it is. People call themselves evangelical who aren't, or people don't call themselves that who are. And so in the book, the first thing that I do is just kind of set out the historical definitions of evangelicalism and the factors that shape the movement and how it's been understood broadly over history. And then I just kind of try to take a stab at how that history defines what it is today.
Well, first tell us the title of the book and when it's going to be published, sometime this fall, I think.
Sure. It's the title of the book is The Evangelical Imagination, How Stories, Images, and Metaphors Created a Culture in Crisis. And it actually releases on August 8th, which is like end of summer, early fall, depending on, your school calendar, I guess. So it's right around the corner.
Well, with my name, Dwight Moody, I have answered on average once or twice a day the question, well, are you related to the famous Dwight Moody? And of course, I've done a lot of research on his life. I don't know my genealogy part of it, but I know that he, Dwight L. Moody, died in 1899, was a main character and in the development of the evangelical ethos and the evangelical movement in the United States. Am I right about this?
You are, actually, and he does make an appearance in my book, a short appearance, but I talk about that Dwight Moody. And by the way, so you are related or not related? You don't know? No.
I don't know.
Okay. So, there's so much that could be said about a figure as looming and large as he is, but the way that I talk about him is because it was a discovery for me. When I write a book, I'm writing about the things I'm discovering and learning. And I did not realize until I was researching for this book and writing about it, that Moody is, responsible for kind of marrying the business model of Christianity and evangelicalism and Christian higher education all together, so because I spent 22 years teaching at Liberty University, the world's largest evangelical university. And it, when I came, was very much defined by this business ethos with the dress code and the rules and regulations. And, some of those rules and regulations are fine, and people can have them. But to tie them to Christianity, or to say that they're somehow, it's Christian to wear a tie or wear your hair a certain length, that's where people get confused, and where the gospel gets tied up into human culture. And I found in my research that Dwight Moody used a lot of methods and expertise and even metaphors that came from the business world, not only to run the school that became named after him, but also even just in the way he went about evangelizing and marrying kind of the business world with even conversion itself and what the Christian life looks like. And that's something that I think that is an assumption that is carried forth all these years, that we need to examine to separate out what truly is Christian versus what is just part of human culture.
In the modern evangelical movement, they appropriate D.L. Moody as an evangelist, as an urban evangelist. But I once took a group of students on a study tour to New England, and I took them over to Northfield and to the school. And we toured the school, his homestead, his grave, all of that. And when they gave me the school material, now, of course, the schools that he started is one of the top high school prep schools in the United States. And they attract students from all over the world. So the schools today do not have the kind of evangelical ethos that they did 100 years ago. But I was really shocked and surprised at how they appropriated the D.L. Moody legacy. They picked up two things about D.L. Moody. One was his international travel. I'll come back to that in a minute. The other was his concern for the urban poor, especially children. And so they parlayed this into, they appropriated, I think appropriately, that part of his tradition into their school, international travel, concern for the urban poor, which I thought was a fresh perspective on D.L. Moody that was intriguing to me.
And I think that's something that the evangelicalism at large has concerned itself with, which is good. I mean, there are many things, and that's what I try to do in the book, is to just look at the things that have become unexamined assumptions underlying evangelicalism that we assume are just gospel or have always been there, when in fact they are, they have a history, they have an origin, and they might be good, but when they are treated as gospel or idolized or separated from other good things that are part of the gospel, then they can become vices rather than virtues.
I'll tell you another D.L. Moody story. For a while, I was dean of the chapel at Georgetown College in Kentucky, and was the host to a wide range of speakers. And one of them came over from the University of Kentucky from the Chinese American Institute. When she walked into the chapel, I was not her formal host as a speaker, but I was in the space. And when she heard my name, she immediately stopped and wanted to talk about Dwight L. Moody. I said, why? What do you know about him? Here she is, a China scholar. And she said, in her research, she did research on Christianity in China in the 19th century, and just over and over again in her research, she encountered the influence, the literature, the voice, the colleagues of D.L. Moody, although he never went to China. It showed up in her dissertation.
Wow.
I thought it was so interesting about it. So here you are, writing about the evangelical world. Give us your definition of what an evangelical is today.
Well, I consider myself to be a Bevington evangelical.
I
So
know exactly what that means.
okay, so for anyone who doesn't, I think that there have been people who've picked at or countered his definition, but I think it's the solid one. And Bevington, who's a church historian, basically looks back at the 300-year history of evangelicalism and identifies the most prominent 4 characteristics of the movement, which of course is across denominations, and it's not necessarily based on doctrine that's unique to anyone who claims evangelicalism. But those 4 characteristics are biblicism, the centrality of the Bible as God's word and authority. Crucicentrism, which is the centrality of Christ's crucifixion on the cross for each one of us. Conversionism, which means that that there's an emphasis on individual conversion experience. And activism, which in the 19th century, of course, really played out in terms of missions. But I think in today's world, we see evangelical activists on a broad array of issues, and that quality still pervades evangelicalism. And I think a lot of people who want to, disavow the term and say that they aren't evangelicals, that's fine. But in many ways, I think, if they view the Bible this way, if they emphasize the conversion experience, if they know that Christ died for them and they have an activist spirit, I think they're evangelicals. And I certainly am one.
But you know that when the word evangelical appears in the newspaper in the morning, regardless of what they're writing about, that's not what they're talking about. It is this overlay of politics and Christian nationalism that has overwhelmed your historic and theological and religious definition. How do you cope with that as a writer?
No, you're absolutely right. And I think we are living in a historical moment that, because we're living in it, we don't know how it will end. And it could be, even though I still embrace the term, because even if I rejected it, it would still, according to Bevington, define my faith. It may be that the historians look back at this moment just like Bevington did, and they have a different term maybe to describe the movement that emerged, the fracturing of this particular movement and whatever, different directions that might result from that. Because we are living in this moment, and sociologists and pollsters and pundits have all used the term to kind of try to describe what's been happening politically, and so it's weakened the term, I think, and caused confusion. And so some would argue we need a new term, and maybe we do. But I think what we really need is to take this moment and call for, essentially like a new Reformation, one that is as dramatic and historical as the one that we had 500 years ago.
Well, Karen, your use of that word, Reformation, immediately pushes my mind to the new apostolic Reformation among the Pentecostal movement. Are you familiar with this?
I mean, I have heard the term, but I am not. That's a completely different world.
This is the wing of the modern Pentecostal movement that is pushing this that has politicized Christian energy, and that is tied to this dominionism and Christian reconstruction, all of these things that are driving so much of what's happening on the right wing of American politics today. So what do you make of this, what we now call religious nationalism, not only in America, but Brazil and Israel and other places? What do you make of it in the United States?
Yeah, well, that I know that is going on and it's getting a lot of traction. And I'm not a scholar of this new movement, but what I do in my book that I think is helpful and can contribute to the conversation is that I point out how and cover pretty in a lot of detail how the original, the evangelical movement as it emerged in the 18th century, first in England and then sort of in its counterpart in America in the Great Awakenings, is that evangelicalism arose in the context of a state church. It was, in England, if you were born into a family that was a member of the state church, you became a member not only of that, a citizen of the nation, but you also became a member of the church. You were a Christian by default. And so we actually lost the sense of the individual conversion experience that I think is essential to being a believer. And so we've done this before, we've tried it before, and evangelicalism arose because of the failures of the union of church and state. And so I think, we are a people who, it's just the human condition. We live in the present. We don't know our history. And as a wise man once said, those who don't remember their history are condemned to repeat it. And I think that's what's going on now. And I'm not a historian by any means, but I read a lot, and we can all read a lot, and we can actually avoid some of these mistakes from the past by just reading a little bit more and remembering our history and trying to do better.
Well, you've written about Southern Baptist. You, for the last few years, have been on the faculty of a Southern Baptist seminary, Southeastern Seminary. I have been, for the first half of my life, a Southern Baptist, educated in Southern Baptist schools. You wrote recently, last year, Can the Southern Baptist Convention Be Saved? I wrote this week in my newsletter, The Sinking of the Southern Baptist Convention. What do you think's going to happen?
Well, a lot can happen in a year, can it?
Really?
Yeah. I don't know what's going to happen. I certainly was more optimistic a year ago. That was fresh off the annual meeting that took place last year, where the messengers overwhelmingly approved measures that would directly address the abuse situation in our churches, and that work has continued, but it has not continued unchallenged. I know it's hard and a complicated issue, and the Southern Baptist ecclesiology plays into how it can and cannot be addressed. It's very different from the Catholic Church in terms of its structure and hierarchy, but not so different, I guess, in terms of the kind of abuses that take place. It's like the horseshoe effect. How two extremes go so far they meet one another in the middle. And so I can't predict. I guess I just take comfort and solace even in the pain and difficulty of this reckoning that we're going through, that God is revealing the fractures and the fissures. He's revealing the corruption, and he's revealing the power struggles. And, a lot of us are being hurt and bruised along the way. But for me personally, it's actually just helping me to remember to cling more closely to Jesus, to have more faith in him and less in human beings. And God has revealed, one of the things I say in the book is that these feel like apocalyptic times. They do. Because we are living in an apocalypse. The word literally means revelation. And God is revealing things that have been hidden, deeds of darkness that have been hidden for a long time, and it's hard to see them, it's hard to face them, but it's actually a mercy that he's revealing them. And it's giving us the opportunity to choose whom we will serve. Will we serve him, or will we serve man-made institutions and traditions that have done so much harm for so long? And it's a hard choice, I get that, but he's laying it before us. And I would love to see the Southern Baptist Convention pulled through, but if it doesn't deserve to.
And yet the strategy of disengaging from institutions and organizations itself cannot be a long-term strategy, because what we do is just form new institutions and new agencies and new organizations that then are susceptible to the same spiritual and cultural diseases. Where, where is good stuff going on? I ask myself all the time, what kind of church does America need right now? What kind of Christian presence? What
That's such
kind
a
of
good
Christian
question.
network?
Yeah, I think we need to return. The pendulum. Human history is a history of pendulum swings from one extreme to another. I certainly also believe in institutions and communities and the power that we can do. The power we have when we do things together rather than apart. But I think what so many things are pointing to our need to just be more deeply rooted in our own communities, and smaller is better rather than larger, and to reject sort of the celebrity culture and the industrial complex aspect of evangelicalism that so many churches and parachurch ministries are caught up in. The Lord has been reminding me recently that the people that I need the most in my life are not the ones who can give me something like an opportunity or some tangible or monetary thing, but the people who have really nothing to offer me except that they know who I am and they love me for who I am, just the regular people in my life, and who've been in my life and investing in it for so long. And I just want to spread that kind of vision to everyone that I can, because I think the days of huge, gigantic, powerful industrial complexes are exhausted, and we need to return more to our local church, our local communities, our families, and our humanity.
Over these past few years, you've been working really on two platforms. You've been at this seminary, a strong, one of the more conservative seminaries in the United States, and Baptist Evangelical School. But you are also a featured writer on one of the most ecumenical interfaith platforms in the United States, the Religion News Service. And so you've had two platforms where you've been trying to engage people in thinking about these issues in a civil, informed, open stance. You feel like you're pulled in two different directions here?
Well, I never did feel that way. I feel like I am solid and grounded in who I am, and that who I am is someone who is conservative in my theology and doctrine, and Baptistic in my ecclesiology, and RNS, as you said, is ecumenical, and so they actually embrace me along with so many others. But I do, I'm increasingly having to face the fact that we are in these increasingly fractured and polarized times, and not everyone is going to accept me for who I am, and I still have to remain true to who God has called me to be. And if I'm not welcome for who I am in the totality of who I am, then I don't need them.
Do you find that your presence at the Religion News Service, which our listeners need to know is the primary distributor of religion news stories nationwide? I read it every single day. They cover everything. It's a very impressive, centered out there, I believe, in Columbia, Missouri. Columbia has one of the chief journalism schools in the United States. So it's got a lot going for it. Do you find your voice is well received? Do you engage with that broader network?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I do find that they came to me a couple of years ago when I became a regular columnist there, and facing the prospect of having more time on my hands and not being employed full time. I may be able to write more there, and so I look forward to that. It's actually kind of funny because way back many years ago when I was a college student, before there was a thing called the internet, I dreamed of being a columnist, and I never even knew that that the internet would exist to get words like mine out there even more. And so it's been heartening and encouraging. And we'll just have to see what the future holds. But I'm really glad to be able to share my views and my thoughts at Religion News Service, and they have been very welcoming. Now, I don't read the comments. That's something I trained myself long ago not to do. So I don't read the comments, but people who respond to me on Twitter or my social media, I'm very glad to engage with them.
Well, that reminds me of this. I distribute my newsletter every Wednesday night, and I monitor the response, who opens and who reads it, and who unsubscribes. And I've had members of my family unsubscribe, and you have to kind of steel yourself to this and be willing.
Well, we all get too much email, so it's not personal, right?
We do, don't we? Well, I appreciate your voice. You are a very winsome writer, and I think your voice is very important. I appreciate seeing your columns on the Religion News Service. I thank you so much for being in the Meeting House today. I hope you come back. When your book comes out, I want to read it. I want to review it for my newsletter. We'll bring you back in the Meeting House and talk more about it, okay?
I would love that. Thank you. It's a deal.
God bless you.
Bye-bye.
My guest today, Karen Pryor, for the last few years has been on the faculty of Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary, a Southern Baptist school, but also a columnist for Religion News Service. This is her first time in the Meeting House. I hope it's not her last. Thank you for joining our conversation today. I'm Dwight Moody, the host of the Meeting House. Visit our website at themeetinghouse.net. You can subscribe to my weekly newsletter of book reviews, of commentary. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel where we have many of these audio and video conversations on religion and American life. It is so important what we're doing. Civil, informed conversations, listening to one another about what is most important in both the religious community and in the national conversation. Thank you. God bless you. Have a great day.